Hey everybody, it's Mr. Howard here for Chapter 1 Wednesday, and today we're going to be reading this book called Watchdog and the Coyotes. I'm holding it up and it's backwards, but you can see it right there on the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the first chapter of this book, and hopefully that'll make you interested enough to maybe you want to check it out from the library. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I do want to talk about before we get going on that, though, is what you can be doing while I'm reading the first chapter of this book. And I think it would be a great idea for you to do what's called a sketch note, and that means while you're listening to me read the book, you can take some notes about what you like, or maybe some things that are familiar or that you notice or interesting to you. And it doesn't have to be notes that you write down with words. You can actually just use a pen, and let's say you want to draw a dog, because you know a lot about dogs, right? So maybe you want to just kind of draw things that you notice or can think about while we're reading the book. So that's something that you can be doing. And then while we do these every week, you can collect all of your sketch notes, and then you can have a journal of books that you'll know a little bit about. So next time you come to the library, you'll have some ideas about things that you might want to check out when you're looking for your next book to read. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our book. So this one's called Watchdog and the Coyotes, and it's by an author named Bill Wallace. And he's written a lot of books. You might have read books by Bill Wallace before. A lot of his books are about kids and animals and pets and things like that. So he's a favorite author of mine. So I thought this would be a good one for our first Chapter 1 Wednesday. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 1. The warm, dry breeze that swept in from the desert felt good on my cold nose. It tingled the little hairs inside my ears and made them twitch and wiggle. My left paw dangled over the edge of my floor. I draped my right paw over it and rested my chin. I watched. It is a watchdog, so that makes sense that the dog would be watching. The sun was nothing but a huge orange sliver above the wooden fence around the backyard, pardon me. It was pretty, but I forced myself to quit thinking about it. I had to watch. That was my job, and I couldn't afford to mess up again. Ooh, that's interesting. Mess up again. I wonder what this dog has done in the past. This was my third chance, probably my last. In a moment, the sun would disappear, and the only thing left would be a bright glow. Higher in the sky were mixtures of yellow and gold. Streaks of clouds were darker. Low in the sky, they were blue. Above, the blue changed to a deep purple. I wished the fence wasn't there. I wished, just once, I could see all of the sunset. Far off in the desert, a coyote howled. It was a lonely sound. It made me feel lonely, too. That's interesting, because that reminds me of the title. So I wonder if those coyotes are going to have a little bit more to do with the story based on the title of the book. I watched. But behind my eyes, vision came. Memories flooded my mind. I missed my mama. She had been so big and wise. I missed my little boy. He had been fun and full of laughter. I missed my big boy. He was rough and tumble, and I could play with him and not have to worry about him crying. How I longed to be with them. Not that I didn't love my new master. He was nice. His laugh rolled and tumbled through the air like thunder rumbling before a storm. But he was just too old to play. His wife didn't play with me either. They fed me well. They petted me and scratched behind my ears, but there was no romp or play in either of them. That was what made me lonely, especially on nights like this when they weren't home. I watched. After a time, the deep purple color filled the sky. The smell of night came and all was quiet, and the quiet made me feel even more alone. I felt that way before, when it's really quiet, it can make you even feel lonelier than just being alone. Things could have been worse, I guess. That's why it was so important for me to watch. That's why I had to do a good job. I had to be careful. Scotty had warned me. Scotty was a Scotty. Oh, that's kind of funny, because a Scotty is a type of dog, so a Scotty named Scotty is kind of silly. He had lived in the yard next to mine back when I lived in California. There had been a chain-link fence between our houses, and not only could we visit, but we could actually see each other. Scotty told me that he was a digger. It's a bad habit, he'd explained. I just can't quit digging. It's kind of like some masters have a habit of smoking cigarettes, and no matter how hard they try, they just can't break the habit. I'm like that too, only I don't smoke, I dig. That reminds me, sometimes I have bad habits, like, maybe I play video games too much, or I eat too much junk food or something like that. It's interesting to make connections like that, so I understand the characters better. Scotty was on his third master when I met him. 2 days after our last visit, Scotty dug up the guy's rose bushes, and sure enough, straight to the pound. That's it, man. About 3 masters is all a guy gets, then off to the pound. Despite the warm breeze from the desert, the memory of Scotty sent a chill up my back. The Schaefers were my third masters. A sound jerked me from my sad memories. I watched. For a time there was nothing. Then a black stocking cap appeared above the black fence. It hesitated there a moment, then rose. I watched. A man's face was under the hat. Nervous eyes scanned my yard. A wisp of the fall breeze brought a scent to my nose. Something about it was almost familiar, but it was a smell I didn't know. An odor that I couldn't taste or understand. I know a lot about dogs, and I know that dogs smell things to understand things. So I know that if a dog doesn't recognize a smell, it must be something new. And usually a watchdog would want to investigate that. The man looked all around. Then there was another clunk as his shoe found the wood rail and he climbed over the fence. I watched. Wonder why he didn't use the gate, I thought, as he jumped from the top of the fence. When he landed, he looked all around again. He had on a black cap and a black shirt and black pants. That's interesting. A guy sneaking into the backyard wearing all black, including a black hat, shirt, and pants. I need to think more about that. The only part I could really see of him was his face. His eyes and forehead scrunched up when he looked toward my doghouse. The way he acted, the way he smelled, it brought a feeling from deep inside me. His actions made the hair bristle in a sharp ridge down my back. He inched forward. Watching him made my lip curl. My teeth felt dry. He stood very still for a moment, then edged toward the house. I watched. I wonder what's happening here. I have a pretty good idea, but I don't want to spoil it. I guess he hadn't seen me where I rested inside my house. When he got close, he suddenly froze, dead in his tracks. He started to shake all over. Nice doggy, his voice quivered when he whispered to me. Nice puppy. The smell was much stronger now. I still couldn't hear or understand it. I forced my lips closed so my teeth wouldn't show. I made the hair relax on my back. My tail made a thumping sound against the wooden floor of my house. He seemed to relax. Then, never taking his eyes off me, he moved toward the Schaefer's house. I watched. But when he disappeared around the side of my house, I climbed out. I peeked around the corner of the doghouse and saw him kneeling down at the back door. He took a tool out of his pocket and started wiggling the doorknob. Wonder why he'd use a tool to wiggle the doorknob. I could hear a jingling sound, but I really couldn't see what he was doing. I moved closer to watch. The man worked and worked. Finally, he glanced around. When he saw me standing right next to him, a little squeal came from his throat. He jumped so hard he landed on his bottom beside the back door. Nice, doggy. I wonder why his voice is so nervous like that. His voice shook as hard as he did. Don't bite me. He put his hands up in front of his face. Nice, doggy. The strange odor was very strong. It came from the man in the stocking cap. The smell sort of hurt my nose, but at the same time it made me feel big and strong inside. It was weird. I won't bite you, I assured him. I'm nice. I learned my lesson with my last master. I'll never bite anything or anybody ever again. But like most people, I guess he just didn't understand dog. He kept his hands up, kept shaking for a long, long time. At last, when I kept wagging my tail and smiling at him, he crawled back to his knees and jiggled the doorknob some more. I watched. He opened the door and went into the Schaefer's house. Oh, I see what's happening here. I could hear him rattling around inside. Every now and then I could see the glow from the little light he held in his hand. After a while, he came out the door. I watched. He carried a big sack to the back fence and lifted it over. Then, still shaking and smiling at me, he came back to the house. I watched as he carried another bag to the back fence, then another. When he climbed over the last time, he waved at me. And here's a little picture that the illustrator added to the book, but I think by now we kind of get what's happening with this guy, right? I mean, if we look at him, we can see that he's wearing all black. He's got a big sack over his shoulder, and he's hopping back over the fence. So I think we can probably tell that this house just got robbed by this guy. And then we have the watchdog here who is just watching, but not doing too much. As you can see in this picture, it looks like a dog that isn't too worried about this person taking the stuff from the house. Let's see how this chapter ends. You dumb mutt, you're the kind of watchdog that I love. I smiled back at him and waved goodbye with my tail. I didn't really like being called a dumb mutt, but the way he laughed and smiled made me feel good. In fact, I could hear him laughing and chuckling as he dragged the heavy bags all the way across the sandy field behind my yard. Besides, he did say that I was the kind of watchdog that he loved. That made me feel great. More than anything else in the world, being a good watchdog was the one thing I wanted. I guess I'd done a good job too. I knew my new master, Mr. Schaefer, would be very proud of me because I watched, just like a good watchdog is supposed to do. So that's a pretty interesting chapter because, of course, the guy who's robbing their house is going to say, hey, you're the kind of watchdog that I love. And it's funny because the dog thinks he did a great job because all he had to do was watch. So that's pretty interesting. I wonder what else is going to happen in this story. I wonder if this dog is going to get in trouble for letting that robber come into their house and take all of those things. And I wonder if this robber is going to be in the story again. It sounds like this guy's up to no good. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that character too. So that's it for the first chapter, but I really recommend that you pick up this book and read a little bit more about this story. So as we know at the beginning, the dog has let a robber into the house, and then later on we're going to beat the neighbors. We know about there's an Irish setter named Red, and there's another kind of dog called a beagle named Pokey, and they all become friends. And we learn a little bit more about the dog, Sweetie, the Great Dane, who we were introduced here in the first chapter. We learn why the dog doesn't want to bite and why it's trying to be super nice. We learned a little bit about that in the first chapter, but I really recommend this if you like books about animals or if you just like books about trying to do the right thing, because that's a big part of the story in this book, is just even when it's hard, making sure that you're always being kind and having a lot of care in what you do and always making sure that you do the right thing. So definitely check out this book, Watchdog and the Coyotes. You'll really like it. And we'll see you next Wednesday for another chapter 1.